It's time to look at another of the new detachments that came out in the data slate last week, and the Orks have got one which is something that they have desperately wanted, and to be honest, kind of needed to really feel complete for a long time, and that is of course nothing else but More Dakka. So yes, this new detachment, and it is funnily enough called the More Dakka Detachment, is all about shooting as you would expect, and it honestly does do a fairly good job of making Orks one of the shootiest armies in the entire game, and you will genuinely have the Astra Militarum and Tau gunlines looking on in envy with your detachment rule, which is called Dakka, and that brings all of your infantry and walker units the rule of sustained hits 2, and also gives them all assault on their ranged weapons when you are in the war. Essentially what this means is that when you are in a war, you will be able to move up, shoot, and charge, all with sustained hits 2, and be getting that 5 up in vulnerable save. So it just makes for an incredibly fast, shooty, fairly strong in combat still army, and one that is still very durable. It is really strong, and it's really orky as well, which I love. Now, orc shooting generally, of course, isn't very accurate, but hitting on 5s with sustained hits 2 bumps you from around a 33% accuracy rate to about 66% accuracy. Essentially, your orcs will now be as accurate as Space Marines, which is insane because orcs typically make up for their bad shooting with some fairly strong damage profiles or just mass volume. So being able to get that volume and that good damage profile to Space Marine accuracy massively boosts your overall output. Anything from 20 orc boys being able to throw down up to 60 shots and getting 40 hits, all the way to things like the stars of the detachment, like your Flash Gitz, which can get 33 hits from their 40 shots and be strength 6 minus 1 AP and 2 damage, so they can wipe out an entire 10-man intercessor squad with just shooting alone in a single phase, which for an army like Orks is fantastic. So in general, if you like orc shooting and you always felt like the Codex detachments didn't quite give you enough Dakka, or you finally want an excuse to bring a Stomper along and actually get some good value out of it, potentially getting an average of 8 strength 14 minus 3 AP d6 damage shots from the Def Cannon on top of the 16 strength 7 minus 1 AP 2 damage shots you'll get from the Super Gatler, then this could well be the detachment for you. In terms of your enhancements, they are of course all shooting focused. The Gobshot Thunderbuss gives the bearers ranged weapons, devastating wounds, and hazardous, so there does have a downside to it, but for 15 points, the ability to put dev wounds on something like a shock attack gun is really strong, although as a quick aside, personally, I think it should have that rule anyway, but still it's a very good take, and it can make things like the shock attack gun an absolute terror into almost any profile with that really solid shooting attack that it's got. Dead Shiny Shooters gives the bearer and his unit rapid fire 1, so again on something like a big mech, comboing really well with their own Mega Blaster or Tractor Blaster, but then also bringing a load more utility to the shooting of Flash Gitz or Tankbustas, or even in theory mech guns, which these guys can join. Giving rapid fire 1 to something like a Smasher Gun or a Tractor Cannon can mean a significantly scarier amount of damage at 24 inches that the enemy will have to watch out for, although at 35 points this is quite a pricey enhancement, so you do really need a plan of where you are going to put the bearer to get the most value out of that rapid fire 1. Next up we have Targeting Squigs. This gives the bearer and his unit +1 to hit with their ranged attacks, which again is absolutely brilliant for Orks with their base, pretty bad ballistic skill on top of sustained hits too. At just 15 points, I would say this is an auto include on any mech that is joining looters or Flash Gitz or even regular shooter boys. It does improve them quite significantly, and it can turn them into a fairly scary little anti-chaff, anti-light infantry threat with their shooters. The last one is Zogoth and Eat Dakka, which is only 10 points. It's the cheapest of the bunch, and I would also say it's probably the weakest of the bunch, but it is still very useful. It gives you the ability to fall back and still shoot. Now, you can't then charge afterwards with this, but being able to get back from a combat and unleash your firepower into an enemy unit is still super handy, and it means you can disengage, move towards an objective and either shoot an enemy off it or go grab an objective that no one is on and then just shoot into the unit that you were in combat with. So it is very good. It does have a lot of use and utility, and I think if you are tight on points, it could be a good pick. I just personally would bring some of the other three first. If I was taking, a couple of enhancements or even taking 3, I would probably look to the other 3 first just to actually improve my overall damage output with my shooting. Now, in terms of the stratagems, of course, they are very shooting focused as well, but the first one is actually very thematic and a little reminder that you are orcs, you do still love a good melee. Orcs is still orcs, is in the fight phase, and it gives a unit from your army the ability to re-roll wound rolls of 1, or you get full re-rolls if the target is on an objective. So even if you've been shooting all game long, when you do get into combat, you can still crump with the best of them. And getting things like Squighog Boys or Meganobs, those juicy rerolls to wound, is fantastically strong, and it does still make your army a significant threat in close combat, even if you are primarily focused around the shooting, and it can mean that the opponent doesn't want to get too close to you, because they know when they do, you are still going to be able to hit back really quite hard. Long Uncontrolled Bursts is, I think, a returning classic from older editions, and at the start of the shooting phase it allows you to pick an orc character and one enemy unit within 18 inches of them, and all orc weapons that target that enemy unit get Ignor's cover, which is really good with your typically low AP on orcs. Being able to get to a pseudo -1 AP on a lot of your guns really can up your output, and with all the terrain that is on boards at the moment, this, I think, will actually have a fairly big impact on your ability to just kill the absolute most amount of your enemy's units as you possibly can. Next up, we have what is, in my opinion, possibly one of the most useful strats for the orcs out of all of their detachments. Get Stuck In, lads. It lets you pick a unit in your command phase, and they count the WAR as being active for them. And this carries on until your next command phase, so they get the ability to advance and charge, they get the +1 strength and attack, they get the 5-up invuln, so they get more mobility, more damage output in melee, and better durability. Yes, it is only one unit, but for just a single command point, that is insane value. And if you need a melee unit to get stuck in, or you think a unit is going to need some more durability this turn, this is just so powerful. It is a really great strat, and I think it's going to be one you will be using almost every turn, especially after you've called your main WAR, which you'll probably do in turns 2 or 3. Having this as a backup gives you so much more mileage and security in keeping a unit alive, and when they do need to get into melee, actually reaching melee and doing the damage you need them to do. Special Shells is another shooting phase strat, giving a unit from your army that hasn't shot +1 to their AP if they shoot at the closest eligible target within 18 inches of them. So it's kind of like Long Uncontrolled Bursts, helping you just get around that low AP issue, but now being even more useful if an enemy unit is out in the open. So getting even something like regular shooters to -1 AP is really strong with their weight of fire and with the sustained hits too from this detachment. And even a unit of 10 orc boys with shooters, if they are within 9 inches of an enemy, will do about 5 wounds to a marine profile. And that may not seem amazing, but in any other orc detachment without these buffs, they do about 1.7 wounds, so it is significantly better, and a full unit of 20 shooter boys can wipe out an entire 5-man squad of intercessors reasonably reliably with this strat. The last couple of strats start with huge show-offs. This gives a walker unit, excluding Killer Khans, +1 move, +1 leadership, +1 to their OC, and also +1 to hit until your next command phase. So this can last potentially 2 whole turns, and giving not only things like your Death Dreads or Gorkanauts, but giving your Stomper, which is a walker, an 11-inch move and, better OC and leadership, but also +1 to hit on all its shooting, makes it absolutely terrifying. I know it is still a pricey 800 points, but with this strat and in this detachment, you have a not completely unreasonable chance of one-shotting an Imperial Knight or just killing about 8 Terminators outright. So no, I will be the first to admit it's not making its points back in one go. It's still, I think, up in the air about whether the Stomper is really amazing in this detachment, but it is certainly much, much better, and its damage output is a lot more noticeable than it is in any other Orc detachment. So if the Stomper is going to be worth bringing anywhere, it's going to be here. Finally, you also get More Dakka. This is also one command point. In the opponent's shooting phase, just after a unit has shot, an enemy unit has shot, you can pick an Orc unit, one of your units that has had one or more models destroyed by that enemy shooting, and they can shoot back at the target unit. So if your Flash Gitz or Looters get targeted down, you can return fire with one command point, and in all honesty, probably put some even scarier firepower into the enemy. Getting reactive shooting on anything from Looters to Flash Gitz to Tankbustas is a really impressive thing to do in the enemy shooting phase, and in this detachment specifically can really let you punish an enemy that is trying to take you down from range. All in all, this is just a really strong detachment. Even something like a minimum unit of Looters will easily kill off a 5-man Marine squad on an objective with this detachment, and at 50 points that is seriously good value. Whilst Tankbustas, on the turn they use their pulsar rocket, can pretty reliably one-shot a medium tank like a Marine Gladiator or an Eldari Fire Prism, which for also just a fairly reasonable 135 points does allow a lot of your units in this army to trade up ridiculously well. It just overall makes the army with some key shooting units like Looters, Flash Gitz, even Death Dreads and Gorkanauts and that sort of thing just so much better at shooting. And what is really good is that Orcs are still fairly decent in melee anyway with your base profiles and having access to the War still, so it does just mean you can run a really shooty heavy list but still have that mobility and that offensive output in combat for when you do eventually need to get there. You don't sacrifice all of it like some armies like Tau and Guard do. You can be good at both, and with shooting in particular, you are very, very good. So just all in all, I really do like this detachment. I know a lot of people have been wanting and waiting for a Dakka detachment for a long time, and GW have certainly delivered. It's incredibly strong, it's very thematic. I would say the only issue with it is that it's bordering on too strong, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some nerfs to it coming along, but it does just turn the Orcs into a gunline army that is arguably one of the best in the entire game at the moment, and you still have a load of really good options for melee units and counterpunch units and mobility units to just get around the board and do your scoring and objectives, whilst those things like Looters and Tankbustas and Flash Gitz and your Walkers just pummel the enemy from range with your now basically Marine accurate shooting. But as always, what do you think of the More Dakka detachment, and which units have been performing well in it for the games you've played? Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.